Welcome to r/EntitledParents, where these two entitled parents enable their 32-year-old son to spy on their other son's girlfriend while she's having a shower. He doesn't know any better. My parents, my dad is 54 and mum is 52, are angry with me for not ignoring my older brother's predatory behavior. Just a little context first about my older brother and the situation at hand. My brother is 32 years old. He's never had a job, dropped out of community college after 2 semesters for never doing his assignments. He's lived with my parents his entire life. He sleeps all day and stays up all night playing video games and watching porn. Both my brother and I am a 27-year-old man, are diagnosed autistic and present our symptoms similarly. But I've been working since I was 17, got my driver's license at 17, bought my first car at 24, and started college in 2019. My parents constantly use my brother's autism as an excuse for his appalling behavior, even though we're both on the spectrum. In November of 2020, I moved back in with my parents because I left an abusive relationship and had chronic health issues. I met my current girlfriend, who is 23, in mid-2021, and in early 2022, she had some extenuating circumstances where my family agreed to let her live with us. My brother was immediately pleased with this development, but just as quickly behaved inappropriately. It started off with him creepily staring anytime my girlfriend and I kissed, and progressed to him following my girlfriend into the bathroom anytime he saw her go in there for a shower, until he figured out she always locked the door because of him. And the straw that broke the camel's back was him trying to come into our bedroom uninvited and without knocking at 3 in the morning while we slept. Every time he behaved inappropriately, we mentioned it to my parents, but all that really happened were excuses made for him because he's autistic, and a brief conversation with him about not doing those things again, and then him still doing whatever he wanted. Anyway, after the bedroom incidents, they kicked my girlfriend out, making her homeless for a brief period of time because she had a PTSD panic attack since my brother made her feel unsafe. As a result of this, my girlfriend and I got an apartment together, and I moved out too because I didn't want to be in the same house as my brother. I was upset with the way my girlfriend was treated, and I wasn't willing to break up with her, which my parents wanted me to do. I had a calm conversation with my parents explaining why I was moving out, where I explained it's their house, so they are more than entitled to make the rules concerning their own home. However, I was not going to continue living somewhere that my girlfriend wasn't welcome and where my brother's predatory behavior was condoned. At first, they told me they love me, that they're sorry they ever made me feel that way, and they want me to keep a key to the house because I'm always welcome over, and that if I ever needed to move back in, I could. Several days later, I went over to pick up some more of my things, only to find that my parents had changed the locks on the door. Later that same week, they tell me they're angry with me for being ungrateful, saying I hate them, and calling them bad parents, none of which I ever said. They went on to tell me that they didn't want to speak to me for a week because they were upset, needed time to process, and because they thought I needed to feel what it was like to be cut out of the family. I respected their wishes, and later my parents agreed to family therapy, which they quickly backed out of because they were only willing to do it over a 3-way video call, and my therapist's website wasn't able to do that. I'm not sure why, but my therapist said it wasn't doable. At which point, I told my parents I would be willing to attend family therapy with a therapist of their choice who could do the 3-way video call, but that's yet to happen. That same Sunday, my parents invited me over for dinner, which I thought went well, only to find they would continue to dodge my calls and leave my texts on read after that night. They eventually contacted me and told me to stop using their house as storage and pick up my things, despite requesting that I stay away for a week. So my girlfriend and I go over to pick up the rest of our stuff, which was awkward but quick. Later that day, I got a text from my mum wishing me luck at college, but my parents still aren't willing to talk about the issues that led to me moving out, or even to come over to see our new apartment after being invited over, because, despite the circumstances, I still love them and want a relationship with them, since this type of behavior is highly uncharacteristic of them. Understandably, my girlfriend isn't fond of them, but told me she doesn't mind me inviting my parents over because it's important to her that I have a relationship with them for the sake of my mental well-being. Has anyone else ever dealt with a situation similar to this? If so, how did you deal with it? Now guys, I'm not sure what's weirder, the fact that your brother thinks he can get away with doing all this, or the fact that your parents let him. It's just very, very strange. This on top of the fact that your parents kicked your girlfriend out of their house because she had PTSD because of your brother. Yeah, your family's very odd is all I can say. I mean, it's easy for me to say as someone who hasn't dealt with any of this or anything remotely close to this, but I would honestly recommend cutting your losses, starting your own family, going to be with your girlfriend and just kind of forgetting your family exists. You can still love them, but from afar. They're mental. Entitled mum chastised my 4-year-old for snacking. I had my kiddo at the park after picking her up from daycare. I usually have her there from about 5 to 6:30ish when we head home for dinner, bath, bedtime routine. I always bring a snack because she's absolutely starving by then. But we find if she eats dinner too early, she gets hungry again at bedtime. So she has a snack at the park, then a late dinner. It works for us, and it's never been a problem until tonight. So I'm sitting on a bench minding my own. Kiddo is running amok, few other kids are there, but it's usually pretty scarce at this hour. My kiddo comes over asking for a snack, and I take out a little bento box with a couple of cucumbers and carrot sticks, dip, and a strawberry. Literally one fat little strawberry. Kiddo takes the snacks and sits down on the ground. This other kid, about her age, was lurking and staring, as little kids do. Then took off to his mum sitting on another bench nearby. I didn't hear him, but obviously it went along the lines of, "Mom, I'm hungry," and then turns and points to us. This woman gets up and while marching over, yells "no" while pointing to my kid in a ruder tone of voice than I would use with my actual dog. My kid, sitting there with a half-eaten strawberry in her hands, looks over and freezes as commanded. And as I'm about to be like, "What the F?" the entitled mum says, "You cannot bring snacks unless you plan to share," as she stops and stands in front of us. I start telling her, pretty politely considering the circumstances, to go ahead and get screwed, while motioning to Kiddo that she's okay to keep eating. Kiddo does, and as she slowly dips the strawberry back in the veggie dip, while watching the entitled mum argue with me, and this grown-ass woman just loses her mind completely. Borderline yelling at my kid about her horrible manners, ironically. Her germs, double dipping her strawberry was disgusting, now her kid can't have any strawberries or dip. Spoiler, they weren't regardless, etc. I told the entitled mum to get lost and stop talking to my kid like that. It's her snack. But I ended up having to pack up my kid and take her home because she was obviously insane and I didn't feel safe there. It turns out Kiddo is a champ and was totally fine with being yelled at by a crazy entitled mum, but she was not very okay with having to leave. Clearly an epic meltdown ensued, while the entitled mum smugly stared me down and, believe it or not, continued to complain. I'm so angry and I wanted so badly to stab a carrot in her eye, but alas, one of us had to be an adult. I hate that right now I feel like we can never go to that park again. I'm so angry. Nah, you can't let one woman stop you enjoying the park with your kid. If she comes over again and does the same thing again, just call the police or something. It's harassment, innit? I know it's a bit of a fast step to take, but you want to be there and you want to be able to enjoy the time with your kid at a park. One woman can't ruin that for you. Don't let her. You'll be okay. And as for double dipping a strawberry, by the way, I've looked at the rules. There is nothing to say that you can't do that, and something I would do myself. So that is just ludicrous. Parents who co-signed on first home don't want to sell. Pretty much self-explanatory. In 2018, my parents helped co-sign for a mortgage and ownership of a home, and also helped out with the down payments. My fiance and I at the time were extremely grateful and still are. We're now married, and my parents are the reason we were able to obtain a home in this crazy market. They mentioned many times that if we ever wanted to sell the home, they'd be more than happy to help us relocate, and that the down payment was a gift. All parents who are capable of helping their children in this way should do the same. 4 years go by, and now my wife, who is 31, and myself, 26, are looking to relocate cross-country with our 18-month-old son to find a more sustainable way of living. We've paid every mortgage payment and all other bills associated with the home. My wife is a skilled PL, and I recently obtained professional engineering status, so finding new work should not be an issue. Since my parents co-signed at 0.05% each, I own 99.9%, they are required to sign documents to list the home, of which they are both refusing to do so. They feel that we are going to cash out from the appreciation of our home and simply squander it all. I don't understand where they're getting this from, as my wife and I have always been very frugal and just want to set our son up for success in the long run. We're looking to sell and immediately purchase a new home, hopefully with a lower mortgage, as well as give them back their down payment with interest. Am I being a spoiled son, and should I just let this dream of moving cross-country go, or should I fight for this? Truthfully, I never asked for help with the mortgage. My wife and I were looking for homes within our budget, but my parents wanted us to have a nicer home. I graciously accepted the offer, but now I'm feeling like a fool, as I didn't know it came with strings attached. Mate, there's no way you're a fool. How could you ever know there were strings attached when your parents explicitly explicitly told you there were no strings attached. Like, come on, you can't predict that. It's just very unlucky and totally selfish from them. To be honest, I don't really get it. They're stunting your life for no reason. Do they just not trust you as an individual? You've said what you're going to do with the money. You've even offered to repay them the entire down payment with interest. Like, that's nuts. Why would they not just accept that? It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, looking through the comments here, it seems that you can do something called a forced sale. When joint owners cannot agree on what to do with the property, sale of the property can be forced by the courts. You need a lawyer to do this though. So I guess that's the way to go down. A bit messy, isn't it? Your own parents doing this to you. But hey, if you have to get involved with lawyers, you got to do it. Now moving on to our final story of today's episode. Now a little bit of context is required with this one. Parents let my brother steal from me until I got my aunt involved. Now, I've covered quite a few of this person's entitled parents posts in the past, and they are pretty mental. Rather than going back over everything that's happened, I'm going to leave a link in the description to the most suitable episode which shows you what this guy has had to go through in his entire life. But to sum up very briefly, pretty much his parents massively favor his brother over him to an unbelievable extent. Anyway, let's get into the story. Back when I was still a kid, it was very hard for anything to be exclusively mine. And as my brother got older, he craved money for things above all else. He and I both got allowances, equal allowances, so that was sort of fair. I say sort of because he didn't have to do chores for his while I did. But that's in the past now because my brother is now having to do all those chores for nothing. My brother always wanted more money though, whether he spent it or not. He loved having new things, but sometimes he would save the money instead, which is odd because you'd think him the kind of kid who would splurge his savings on the first thing he wants. My brother and I both got allowances of about $25 per month, and I was pretty thankful for it. I usually saved most of mine, but my brother always wanted more. One day as a teenager, I came home to find that my room had been ransacked, and the only thing gone was my money. I'd hidden it to try and keep it from my brother, because, well, obvious reasons if you guys know what my brother is like by now. And I thought I'd hidden it well, but he found it anyway. My mum was home when he did it too, and she acted like she didn't even notice. But there's no way that she couldn't have heard him tearing my room up. I called her out on that during the intervention, and she just cried and made excuses about my brother being special till other family members told her to shut up and own up to it. Now guys, if you haven't already heard the previous story, you're missing a tiny bit of information, but it's not, decisive. Again, if you do want to hear that first, link down below. My room was on the first floor right in the living room. My door was completely in view of the couch. And when I pointed this out back then, my mum just made the, "But he's special, he's not like you," excuse for my brother. I said I wanted the money back, and my mum just made more excuses. And my dad did too when he got home later. So yeah, excuses then and now. Back then, I did eventually get that money back because I refused to let it go. I heard my brother screaming as they took the money out of his piggy bank and gave it back to me. And they had the most disappointed looks on their faces, like I just robbed my brother, even though he'd robbed me. But they couldn't tell me off because I wasn't in the wrong and they knew it. I don't imagine many kids getting in the kind of situations where they are more right about something than their parents very often. A few months later, and the whole situation repeated. My brother ransacked my room again and stole the money I'd hidden again. But that time, my parents didn't want to do anything about it, and they basically said that they couldn't bear to see my brother so disappointed from taking his money. I reminded them that stolen money wasn't his money, and it was really trashy that they were just sitting back and letting it happen. My dad yelled at me to go to my room for saying that. So the next day, I rode my bike to my aunt's house and told her everything. She came back home with me and asked my parents if they'd really let my brother steal from me and done nothing about it. My mum just started whining that my brother has special needs and she didn't want to make him cry again. And my dad backed her up. My aunt just gave them both that narrow-eyed look and reminded them that they have 2 sons and my feelings matter too. And what they were doing was very wrong. It meant that my brother would never respect boundaries and would think that he could always get away with stealing when he gets older. My aunt asked me openly how much my brother took. I stated the number, which at the time was everything I had, save for the few bucks in my wallet. My aunt gave my parents an expectant glare. My parents tried making a few more excuses, but my aunt had a counter for each one. Finally, my parents went into my brother's room, and a moment later, my brother was screaming. My parents came back with all of the money my brother took and practically threw it at me for making my brother cry. My aunt then told them off for acting that way when I'd done nothing wrong, and they picked up all of the money they'd thrown at me and gave a pretty forced apology. My aunt said that she would be severely disappointed in them if they let this situation repeat. And before she left, my aunt offered for me to hide my money at her house in a lockbox she had. I took her up on that and started keeping my savings over there. Now, I don't want to intervene here, guys, but can you what am I reading? Your own parents are being scolded by your aunt, and your aunt is having to say to you, you can keep your money at my house where it will be safe from your brother and your parents. That is so mad. Anyway, my brother ended up ransacking my room 2 more times looking for money, but I was keeping every cent I had at my aunt's house. My parents actually asked me where I'd hidden it, and I refused to tell them. Then I asked why they wanted to know so badly anyway, and my dad instantly got defensive about it. My mum calmed him down and they didn't ask again. Since he couldn't find my money in my room, my brother figured I must have hidden it somewhere else. So he started tearing the house apart, one room after another. And who was made to clean up the mess? Why, yours truly, of course. My parents started to blame me for the whole situation. But when I asked how I was at fault for not letting my brother steal from me, their only counter was that my brother was special needs. I swear they'd used that line with me thousands of times. That was something else I heavily berated my parents for in the family intervention. The final straw came when my brother ransacked our parents' bedroom. My parents had a small suitcase safe that they kept some cash in, and my brother locked himself in their room, then took the whole safe and started bashing it around on stuff to try and get it to open because he couldn't find the keys. By the time my parents were able to get the door open by breaking it open, my brother had just destroyed the room, and he never even got the safe open. He just sat on the floor, clutching it and crying about the money inside. My dad was so angry that he turned red, and they actually started yelling at my brother and even grounded him. A very rare sight for me to see back then, indeed. Then my parents forced my brother to help clean up the mess. After that, my brother never ransacked mine or my parents' rooms looking for money again, but he would still go rooting around every time he had an idea of where my savings could be. So I started acting like I was giving hints by repeatedly going into certain places while he was watching. He ransacked the backyard shed, dug a bunch of holes in the yard and under the back porch, and even ransacked the attic. My parents really hit their breaking point with the attic and grounded my brother again. They never figured out I led him on either. My parents did eventually figure out that I was keeping my money at my aunt's house, and they didn't argue with my reasoning for doing it. But either my brother overheard, or one of them spilled the beans to him, because the next time we visited my aunt, my brother tried to hunt for the money. But my aunt yelled at him to stop, and my brother just sat on the floor and cried. This happened a few times, and my aunt bluntly stated that she would press charges for any damages if my brother ransacked anything, and she also kept a digital camera on hand to record anything if need be. My parents heavily scolded my brother to stop looking for my money. It wasn't his, and he can't have it. Cue more screaming and crying that he wants it like a 3-year-old, even though he was 7 at the time. Then my brother said he didn't want to go to Auntie's house anymore, so my parents visited less. My aunt visited us a lot more than we visited her anyway. I was pretty much able to keep my money away from my brother until after I moved out, and he's never managed to steal cash from me again. His classmates at school were another story. He was caught looking through the backpacks of other kids many times, and he was forced to return stolen stuff, and then sent home where he'd cry to mum and dad, who then tried to have words with the school, who berated them for letting my brother think that what he was doing was okay. They had to teach my brother that it's not okay to go through other people's stuff. And I actually heard him say, "But I wanted what they had," a few times. This excuse got used again when my brother stole an envelope with birthday money from a cousin during their birthday party. He tried to stuff it in his shirt and walk out with it later, but the cousin noticed it was missing, and I suspected my brother right away and pointed everyone to him. He ended up crying and thrashing when my dad found the envelope hidden in his shirt. We left that party early. Again, guys, I implore you to watch another video or episode linked in the description below, and it will appear on the end screen in just a few seconds to hear more about this incredible family. Incredible is an interesting use of word there, but you know what I mean. It is actually good to hear, though, that finally, despite some scolding from your aunt that should never have had to happen, your parents do seem to be learning that your brother shouldn't be allowed to just steal from random people. And they seem to have stopped enabling his terrible behavior as much. I don't know, it's still questionable, but at least they're on the right path. As for OP, once again, I think I said this last time, but bro, just keep going on, mate. Like, your situation is truly terrible, so fair play for dealing with it. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to. I think I would have had to leave home and just leave the country probably. What a mess that this family is, I'm sorry to say, but you're a good lad. Fair play to you.